Write that down, Fumi Saito. Write that down, Fumi Saito.
Everyone, welcome back to Write That Down. I'm your host, Justin Knipper. I'm editor at FightGameMedia.com, F4W Online, and WrestlingObserver.com. And I'm back with Japan's leading wrestling writer, historian, broadcast journalist, Mr. Fumi Saito. Welcome back to part 2 of our showcase series on Giant Baba. In this episode today, we talked about Giant Baba's transition from a star wrestler into a promoter during the beginnings of All Japan, when it started in 1972, 50 years ago this year. And we talked about this deep relationship that developed between All Japan, his organization, and the NWA in the US. And we talked about why many Japanese fans viewed the NWA as the true big leagues of pro wrestling back then. Next week, we'll pick up at Giant Baba's career during the early 1970s, again at the beginnings of All Japan Pro Wrestling. Baba would eventually phase out from being the star wrestler to support act in the ring, and behind the scenes, he's the king. Next week, we'll also talk a lot more about Mrs. Baba, Motoko Baba, and the relationships he had to many of his All Japan sons, you could call them. That's next week. 日本のリスナーの皆さん、いつも英語で聞いてくださってありがとうございます。日本語でなくて申し訳ありません。もしもよろしかったら、Spotify、Apple、Downcast などのご利用のプラットフォームで Fight Game Media Network をごとうるくいただけると助かります。ありがとうございます。Alright, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the Fight Game Media Network free feed. You can do it on any platform that you listen to podcasts on, like Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Downcast. Thank you in advance. And thank you for subscribing anyway. Those who are already subscribed. Thank you. Thank you. All right, let's get into it. Giant Baba Part 2.
What I'm trying to get to is, though, Giant Baba was Japan's 60s, early 60s into mid 60s economy, booming, and television turning into, living color, from black and white TV to color TV. This another era begins.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Giant Baba was there. Actually, see, Ricky Dozan wasn't all that big guy, The myth, he says he's like 180 centimeter, but from what I see from the photos, he must be around like 5'9"-ish, 5'8", 5'9"-ish. He's stocky, 230, 40 pounds. But it was important to be shorter than American big wrestlers, because Americans, like a stereotypical American big guy, like a Sharp Brothers, whatnot.
Kowalski.
Ricky Dozan. Yeah, right. So Ricky Dozan's gonna, beat this big American with his karate chop. So it was okay to be a little shorter. But in Baba's era, he is just like when the Tokyo Tower, being built, that the Tokyo Olympics coming to Japan, not this Tokyo Olympic, but 1964 Tokyo Olympic. There was a lot of signs and symbols of Japan's not a quite development. What's the word I'm looking for? It's like Japan's making comeback, not just the post-war, but like you become that industrial and economic center of the world type of deal.
Right, the giant recovery.
Yeah. And Giant Baba symbolized that too. And color television, Giant Baba, the baseball is, Yomiuri Giants always, it's a big, favorite. And yeah, so Baba fits into the mode of the era. And compared to Antonio Inoki, he was television star, much bigger television star than Antonio Inoki. It was always Inoki who wanted to be like Baba, right? So that's where See, in today's wrestling, Antonio Inoki seems like much more influential and like the type of superstar you really have to study what he has done and his fingerprints in the industry. Muhammad Ali and Inoki, the beginning of MMA, that all these things that innovating things Inoki has done. But the Giant Baba was much bigger star than anybody in the wrestling industry in Japan. Therefore, that's probably why Inoki really had to be always conscious that we gotta surpass Giant Baba.
Yeah, he wasn't just a wrestler. He wasn't just a baseball player. He seemed like a kind of symbol or representation of a lot of different things in one person.
In time, yeah. Like you and I talked about, just kind of like a modern day Paul Bunyan kind of thing,
right? Yeah. Like a folk hero.
Yeah, I think so. And also, he very elusive too. That he was like, he never gave like your wrestling interview. When newspaper come and do interview, it's more like about like a people section instead of sports section.
Mm-hmm.
In newspaper, and he never really did this wrestling like he's gonna beat somebody and all these never did this. He sat down and had a cup of tea or something and talked about his childhood, talked about his baseball days, talked about days in the States all by himself, traveling around the world, then wrestling champion. So they just so happened to be wrestling champion, and in his Giant Baba's media interview, the wrestling part was just one of the few things that they talked about, not just only wrestling, but he talked about his life, and that's how he's always been treated. And I guess some people can be so naturally babyface, and whereas some people just have to be in character, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Baba never was.
He really couldn't be. He was a giant. He was himself. And he was already established as a baseball player beforehand.
But it wasn't the big star baseball player, but the tallest guy, and signed out, right off high school, and the Yomiuri Giants signed him before there was such thing as baseball draft. That the baseball draft doesn't start till 65, and Baba's just right off high school, and in fact, he didn't even finish 12th grade. He signed with Giants in the middle of his 11th grade year.
He's special.
A very special.
Special character. Nobody before or after really was just
right. And always talked about how he never was able to buy clothes or shoes or sandals or the sneakers, the tennis shoes, all the regular clothes, right? So it was very special when he traveled to America, and as a wrestler, of course, that he finally went into department store where you can find any clothes, not any clothes, but it has to be a big man size. But he was able to buy shirt, the T-shirt, the pants, even denim, and tennis shoes and the dress shoes, and all the way till until the day, all the way to 90s, he always went to States to buy his clothes. Or tailor-made suits, always, had his suits made. He even ordered custom-made socks, like dozens and dozens of socks, It's like, it's all Giant story, huh?
It's unique experience, unique life experience.
Right. And also, he was, it's another folk heroes, the item you need is your prince and princess love type deal that Shohei Baba met Motoko when he was 17 and she was only 15. And while in the second trip to the States, he was staying with Fred Atkins in Lake Ontario. That's when Baba and Motoko was writing each other letters, love letters. those love letters in always in the exhibition, and when they do the Baba exhibition at the gallery or something, that those airmail, old-fashioned handwritten letters to each other, they kept it. So it's a part of the exhibition. Baba being 25, Motoko being 23, and they're writing each other letters, decide to be together kind of thing. And also that they tell a real good story. Giant Baba had a single match, very important single match against Bruno Sammartino before there was such thing as WWE or WWF, of course. But Vince McMahon Sr., Vincent James McMahon's WWF, I should say, wouldn't start till 1963. Okay, the Bruno Sammartino against Buddy Rogers thing. But the year before that, 62, they already had single match at Madison Square Garden. Giant Baba against young Bruno Sammartino. And then came back in second trip in 64. Yes, now it's WWF, and Bruno Sammartino is your symbol, that the king of WWF, and is the main event of Madison Square Garden, and have another important single match against one another. Baba against Bruno Sammartino, main event Madison Square Garden. That's when Motoko made in her first trip to New York, and Baba and Motoko were in the backstage of Madison Square Garden in 1964. They clearly remembered 19-year-old Vincent Kennedy McMahon running around, 19-year-old Vince running around backstage of Madison Square Garden with bow tie on. Is that interesting?
It's funny to think. I wonder if Vince and Linda McMahon wrote each other love letters.
Probably did, because he served he was in service too, right? In a short period of time. But yeah. And also college friend, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so similar. I think they are similar. I guess a lot of people were like that back then. Yeah.
Hey, Fumi, can I pause this for a second? I'm having a weird issue with this microphone, so I'm going to pause
Sure.
here.
They clearly remember. I heard this from Motoko in person. It was in 1990 when Vince McMahon came and promoted Wrestling Summit at the Tokyo Dome. All Japan, New Japan, and WWE worked all together as a Wrestling Summit and had a big show at the Tokyo Dome. Remember?
Very special. Probably won't ever happen like that again.
Oh, probably not. It was main event was Stan Hansen against Hulk Hogan, very historical match. And Giant Baba and Andre the Giant made a tag team for the first time. And they went over on Demolition, I believe. And there was historical Randy Savage against Genichiro Tenryu. That was a very good match.
Oh, one of my favorites. What a match.
Yeah, that was like the chemistry thing that they never met, but it clicked. And actually, it was a first Japanese wrestling match where female manager outside the ring, it really worked. Sensational Sherry Martel.
She was amazing in the match.
Oh, and the Japanese wrestling never had that, then yeah.
It felt like so America versus like the American pro wrestling versus Japanese pro wrestling. It really felt like that.
It was so Japanese, huh? Yeah, and Macho Man Randy Savage, of course, epitome of American professional wrestling.
He's like a cartoon character at that point. He's over the top, and
he moves so big, and his gestures and mannerism is just was produced as a big audience movement. That he moves so slow, but it's like so exaggerated everything, and you can be in nosebleed and understand him, right?
And he's so colorful too.
Of course. But it somehow worked with this Tenryu's such seriousness in the ring, and they really complemented each other.
Yeah, it was a perfect conflict.
Yeah,
perfect conflict. There was
a good match though.
Well, there was the story right up front. Somebody, Randy Savage is disrespecting Tenryu. That's what I read going into.
Oh, okay.
And you get the match.
But there was no big promo, mic promo, just talking about each other or anything like that. Just went right into the ring and started a match, and it just kind of clicked. I mean,
They
that was
told the
the
story.
type of match that, there was such a good match that we talk about that match to this day. Anyhow, that was around the time. That was a day, I think, that I stand right by the dugout, and then Motoko Baba was standing right next to me. Oh my gosh! But we talked, and said she remembered 19-year-old young Vince McMahon running around backstage of Madison Square Garden with his bow tie. His bow tie was the point. 19-year-old Vince McMahon running around because his father, Vincent James McMahon, running the show, and that's what Motoko remembered from that day. Oh, that's Mr. McMahon's son, and never thought 30 some years later that he's the one running the show.
NFL Sunday Ticket is now on YouTube and YouTube TV, which means that it just got easier to be an NFL fan, even if you live far away. Like maybe you like the Bears, but you're hibernating in Panthers territory. But with NFL Sunday Ticket, your out-of-market team is never more than a short distance away. Specifically, the distance from you to your remote control. NFL Sunday Ticket, now on YouTube and YouTube TV. Go to youtube.com/presale to get $50 off.
Terms and embargoes apply. Offer ends 9/19. No refund. Subscription auto renews.
What's up? It's Kaylee Cuoco. When it comes to travel, we all have a happy place. I just went to my happy place. I just went to Maui, and it was truly amazing. Priceline has always been about getting you to your happy place for a happy price with deals you really can't find anywhere else. Like up to 60% off select hotels in Costa Rica or 5-star hotels for 2-star prices in Cabo.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
She probably never viewed him like a rival.
Oh, not really. The kid with bow tie grew up, to become the biggest promoter in the world. Motoko felt good about it, I guess.
But it's always going to be Vince Senior's son to her.
I guess, yeah, because that's a generation thing.
Yeah.
That's why not just Baba and Motoko, but the group of older wrestling fans in Japan still call today's Vince McMahon Jr. Is that
it's definitely like a lost piece of the WWE story as well as the All Japan story. It's
because I think this Vince resented the junior part of his name, and he never used it. He was always Vince McMahon on television and TV telestage, and also he takes all the junior away, the junior name away from the wrestler. Remember, Rey Mysterio is actually Rey Mysterio Jr. in Mexico. Yeah. Or when Ted DiBiase Jr. debuted, you don't have to be, $1 Million Man Ted DiBiase's son. Remember him? Mm-hmm. His name was also Ted DiBiase, but never used the name Junior.
Dory Funk?
Dory
Did he ever
Funk
drop Junior?
Was made to Haas. Dory Funk Jr. in WWF was Haas Funk.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, seriously. Vince hates the word Junior. I believe so. But
it explains a lot about a person with that one. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, but the name of being called somebody's junior, it's like almost humiliating, right?
I guess. I mean, it depends on who. I guess it depends on who.
Yeah. So, the Cowboy Bob Orton in Japan was Bob Orton Jr. in Japan, but he was never Bob Orton Jr. in WWF. He was Ace or Cowboy Bob Orton.
Mm-hmm.
So in WWF, you just don't use the word junior. Yeah, that's one of the things that they don't talk about. But let's go back to Giant Baba, and there was another, almost like a Paul Bunyan story, how they remember and looked at WWF and WWE and Vince Jr. and all that. But yeah, Baba was such that when the TV became all color, and Tokyo Tower being built, and Tokyo 1964 Tokyo Olympic came. It was just Giant Baba really, symbolized the 60s and into 70s, economy booming and industrial and all this high-tech Japan kind of image, Baba fits right into that.
The resurgence of a Japanese market, Japanese economy in the world. Yeah. Good times.
Yeah.
So it's been said.
And also, he's always been the main guy on 8 o'clock, Friday night, primetime wrestling. Ever since the Rikidozan's era, we always had Friday night, 8 o'clock, primetime wrestling on Channel 4. But Giant Baba became the main guy of that, the color version of that. And he was international heavyweight champion. You wonder, see, in English-speaking world, does international heavyweight champion and world heavyweight champion, does that sound, which is better, world heavyweight champion and international heavyweight champion?
I mean, I think we're conditioned to believe the world is, even though it's pretty much, if you define both, means the same thing.
Yeah, it's the same, means the same thing, yeah.
But in wrestling, we've been conditioned to believe, the international or anything with an I is less than the best. It's not, the world is, I don't know, I guess.
Okay.
It's not official or unofficial. I think that's just my opinion. I think that's what we've been, we've been programmed. This is how it is. That's how it's been for decades and decades.
Yeah, because the world, and then also world means America.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, because United States heavyweight champion, U.S. champion, that's like almost like a world championship too. Because not quite, but the
WWF really did away with a lot of the territorial championships or anything that was kind of sport. They just wanted everything under the one umbrella and
sure. Yeah, up until 1984, national expansion WWE era, that each and every territory had the championship, and there were a number of U.S. heavyweight championship. U.S. In Crockett's U.S. heavyweight champion, the Sheik's U.S. championship, that in late 50s into 60s, the Chicago U.S. heavyweight champion. And there was, the Canadian version of the U.S. title in Toronto. And Inoki even had the U.S. title in Tokyo Pro Wrestling. And so United States heavyweight title meant something, that it's like a big title. But yes, it was Vince McMahon that made it into World Wrestling Federation champion. Didn't even say heavyweight champion, so WWF champion. But they created a universal title now above. Now it's in the universe that the universal title is above WWF championship. I don't know, but anyhow, that the Baba was always international heavyweight champion in Japan. So I guess Japanese fans were conditioned to believe that's the most important title in wrestling. Okay, and the Baba was the main guy every week, Friday night, 8 o'clock, and international heavyweight champion we were talking about. That in the Japanese wrestling calendar, that maybe the listeners have to be reminded that it's kind of like Japanese wrestling always had this calendar year. You have like a 7-8 tours, like a period, 4 to 6 week period that they run tours. Then they televise it in every week, but each tour had this different set of American stars, right? Mm-hmm. This tour you have Dick the Bruiser and so on. This tour you have Gene Kiniski and so and so. You have this tour you have Wilbur Snyder and Danny Hodge together or something like that. Each and every tour, the top gaijin, I should say, will challenge Giant Baba's international champion on top, like a single top program. And Baba defends his international title and wins. And that was the program. And by living in Japan, to spend 1 year in Japan watching wrestling, you'll be watching 6, 7, 8 different tours with 6, 7, 8 different sets of American superstars. They rotate, and you ended up watching all these, superstars from all the different territories. NWA territory, I should say. NWA wasn't one company, but it was more like the membership of, a bunch, the clusters of a bunch of different the regional territories. The wrestlers from NWA Florida, wrestlers from NWA Georgia, the Pensacola, the wrestlers from Dallas, Texas, wrestlers from Houston, Texas, wrestlers from Tennessee, that sometimes AWA wrestlers, or wrestlers from California, or Vancouver, Canada, Calgary, or Montreal, Toronto, or East Coast America. There's just all kinds of different top stars then. It was all before WWE took over the entire world, that there were good-sized American territories, like 25 of them all over the country. And each place sent their top stars to Japan. Then Baba would be there to defend his international title. That's how they function, I guess. That's how they were doing. Does that make any sense?
Baba would take on the foreigners.
Yeah, top
best, usually the best of whomever, like an NWA. You said it could be from either Bruno Sammartino before the WWF to NWA champions like Jack Briscoe and
Dory Funk. Yeah,
Dory Funk.
Yeah, Harley Race, younger Harley Race, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when they conditioned and educated Japanese fans that NWA, National Wrestling Alliance, was the undisputed World Heavyweight Championship, and that was the biggest organization of all the biggest governing body of professional wrestling and such. And older wrestling fans, like older than you and I in Japan, they still believe the NWA, myth to this day. But it was a membership thing that JWA, Nippon Pro Wrestling, that's the same company Rikidozan ran when he was alive, but now that in 60s, the company was run by Yoshino Sato, okay? They became, Yoshino Sato and Kokichi Endo became official member of NWA in 1968 or something, 67, 68. That's when they announced NWA, National Wrestling Alliance, was the biggest organization, and its champs. When Luthes came to Japan back in 1957 and had a title defense against Rikidozan, they didn't really announce NWA. It was simply World Championship, right?
Mm-hmm.
But now they acknowledge NWA as name, and the first NWA World Heavyweight Champion under that the name NWA, it was Dory Funk Jr. In 1969, Dory Funk Jr., as young 28-year-old Dory Funk Jr., made his first trip to Japan. He had a title defense against Giant Baba and Antonio Inoki separately. It was both 60-minute Broadway, of course. The first night, Inoki challenged, no falls. Just 60-minute. Back then, everything was the 2 out of 3 fall match, right?
Mm.
But Inoki and Dory Funk fought 60-minute with no fall, no pinfall, nothing, and therefore Dory Funk Jr. defended his title. Second night, Giant Baba challenged. Woo, right? That was a big deal because international champion Baba challenging Dory Funk Jr. as a challenger. Dory Funk Jr.'s NWA title. 2 out of 4 3-match, 1 fall each, and third fall went to that, the 60-minute. And therefore, Dory Funk kept the title. So that's when Japanese fans believed there was something above Japanese wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that NWA exists as something like above Japanese wrestling, and the NWA understood. There was people understood there is something bigger and better, and that's an organization, NWA, and Dory Funk is a champion, and therefore the whole idea of NWA being undisputed world heavyweight champion was established in Japan. That really was a very important part when Inoki was actually fired from JWA, Nippon Pro Wrestling, in December of 1971, and Baba basically quit JWA spring of 72. There was like a turmoil in company, and after Rikidozan's era, same network money from NTV Channel 4 kept coming to wrestling, and even without Rikidozan, Japanese wrestling JWA always had this network big budget. And July of 1969, another network, NET, now it's TV Asahi, okay? Two networks, two channels, Channel 4 and Channel 10. Two channels and network television start carrying wrestling. What I'm trying to get to is that Yoshino Sato and JWA Company, who were running, Japanese wrestling at the time, they basically double dipped network budget, right? Started double dipping, even bigger budget. It's the same JWA, but they had Friday night wrestling with Giant Baba, and Monday night 9:00 they had same crew JWA, but they used Antonio Inoki as the top guy. Giant Baba does not appear on Channel 10 NET TV Asahi's show. So then, as a kid, it's the same JWA, but it's Monday night 9:00 television. The Inoki's the main guy. Then Friday night 8:00 Channel 4. It's Baba's the main guy. And Inoki actually appeared both channels. But they started wondering, is that two different kinds of wrestling? And then they ultimately became later on New Japan and Old Japan. Had to be, But basically Yoshino Sato and JWA Company were double dipping two different network channels, double budget, right? But wrestlers weren't making as much money, and Antonio Inoki and his group of people went into their account and wanted to know what was happening in the bookkeeping. And Baba wanted to do the same. But I guess something backfired, and the company fired 29-year-old Inoki, and Baba was part of the revolution, so Baba didn't, want to stay there, and Channel 4 people, Nippon TV, basically told Baba to leave the company, then create your own wrestling company, and we'll back you. Much like decades later, if you remember, when Misawa and his group left that version of All Japan to create Pro Wrestling Noah, Channel 4 went with Misawa and left All Japan. Remember? So a very similar thing happened, a couple of decades before that. And Giant Baba ended up creating his, initial All Japan Pro Wrestling in summer of 1972. And Channel 4 started, carrying Giant Baba's All Japan program right away. And shortly after that, sure enough, JWA, Nippon Pro Wrestling, went down. That's the history. Well, what I'm trying to get to is, though, NWA myth in Japan was so big that basically what Baba did right away, right after he opened his All Japan Pro Wrestling, he went to St. Louis and got the NWA membership right away. Yeah. So that the NWA World Heavyweight Champion will be appearing in Giant Baba's All Japan Pro Wrestling from that point on. Interesting, huh?
Could you say that people view the NWA like they viewed MLB and baseball?
Yeah, something like that, yeah. Or NFL, or biggest governing body of professional wrestling. Probably wasn't. It was a bunch of, regional promoter get together once a year and then go to Las Vegas and have, spend a weekend together or something, right? But in reality, they were, all the regional companies in territories in states for 20, 30-year period, they shared a common world heavyweight championship. World champion Luthez, Buddy Rogers, the Pat O'Connor, the Luthez again, and Jane Kaniski, Dory Funk, Hardy Race, Jack Briscoe. These people actually traveled territory to territory to defend his NWA World Heavyweight Champion, and that the local champion, like a Florida Heavyweight Champion, that the Georgia Heavyweight Champion, the whatnot, they challenged NWA World Champion in regional territory. And then Throughout the year, NWA World Heavyweight Champion will travel territory to territory. And Giant Baba's All Japan became one of the NWA territory. Therefore, you have Dory Funk, Harley Race, Jack Briscoe, all these people travel to Japan. And when they come to Japan, you work NWA member Giant Baba's All Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Are you following me? Yeah.
And we can watch, these days, we can watch a lot of the older remastered matches, and you can see I guess if you had to say there's an NWA style, the style that All Japan and early JWA was very similar to what you'd see in the States I'm talking about for heavyweight title matches with Baba or Inoki.
Right.
Right. But particularly now here with Baba, I mean, it was the NWA style of pro wrestling.
Yeah, and then also he was Giant Baba as a promoter was meticulous. When they have, let's say Giant Baba against Jack Briscoe or something in a world title match, he actually brings Sammartino over from St. Louis to be witness of the World Heavyweight Championship, the title match, to make it more authentic, I guess. Yeah.
And later it worked both ways, because I remember All Japan would always send over a television crew. NTV would send over a big television crew to, record Baba with somebody, or Bruce.
Right, when Baba travels to the States and have a match in NWA territory or AWA territories, and yes. And also, there was a 2-year period, 73 and 74, I believe, 2 years in a row, that Antonio Inoki's New Japan Pro Wrestling applied for NWA membership and denied in 2 years in a row.
Mm.
And so that was the news. So that made NWA even bigger as an entity. Wow, they denied, Antonio Inoki's application, and then they choose Baba over it, But to think about this, NWA had this mentality, not really studying the market, I guess, at the time, that one territory and one company, that's it. But that's the philosophy going against free enterprise, don't you think?
Well, yeah. There's one enterprise in that case.
Yeah, it's not. It was like more like such a monopoly mentality. One regional territory, one wrestling company, that's it. And then I guess it was all political, that group of promoter who were friends with Baba didn't want to welcome Inoki's New Japan as a member of NWA. And of all people, Inoki wanted to be part of NWA for that period of time. Well, to invite World Heavyweight Champion or more bigger superstars from America. At the time, Inoki's New Japan didn't have much big name American superstars. In early 70s. You had Karl Gotch's influence, of course, and the biggest superstars for Inoki's New Japan was the Tiger Jeet Singh, Maguire Brothers, and Johnny Powers, Killer Carcrop, and people like that. And a little bit of influence from here, that the Los Angeles promoter Mike LaBelle was just about the only NWA promoter who was helping Inoki's New Japan. So they sent LA, wrestlers like John Tolas, and New Japan created NWA North American Tag Team Championship. And Inoki and Sakaguchi traveled to States and had a match at the Olympic Auditorium, and they crowned NWA North American Tag Team Champion as Johnny Powers and younger Pat Patterson together. The reason Pat Patterson was involved was that Inoki and Pat Patterson friends from Oregon and San Francisco days, But Inoki had very limited help from all the promoters from the States. But because NWA at the time, early 70s NWA promoters' mentality, they did not know the market of Japan. There were two kings in Japanese wrestling, Baba and Inoki. But for older generation promoters, Baba was the only important promoter in Japan. Does that make sense?
Because before Baba, it was just one promoter. It was Riki Dozan.
Right. Therefore, basically monopoly. They all go against your, free enterprise, though, don't you think? But then again, wrestling promoter always had this monopoly mentality.
Well, I think what it also did, and this is more of a observation and a benefit to, in retrospect, it's better for the fans. But what happened was, it seems like All Japan was where you would see the big stars from around the world, whereas New Japan became less of, because they didn't have the access to the big stars. They and Inoki really relied more on spectacle, bringing in international fighters or
Right.
gimmicks
Oh,
like
hell, he
Tiger
had
Beat
to.
Singh.
Ultimately, that led to the creation of IWGP concept.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
But
it developed in a different way,
yeah,
for better or
different.
worse.
It divided wrestling fans in Japan too, though, because some people believed in Giant Baba's establishment in the connection with America. That is your legitimate lineage from wrestling business and wrestling history. That this, NWA, the biggest governing body of professional wrestling, choose Giant Baba as a promoter and represent Japan. Whereas Inoki, like a one-man show superstar on the other channel. Remember? So yeah, so we always had this almost like a two different philosophy, right? If you watch Giant Baba, this is like like you said, like MLB or NFL, all these superstars come to Giant Baba, whereas Antonio Inoki didn't have any American superstars. Therefore, you had to create your own program. But Inoki was one man superstar on that television too, so it works both ways, I guess. But the Giant Baba, yes, was the superstar wrestler, but also was viewed as like promoter, like a faithful promoter.
Yeah. So when he started promoting, when he started getting more serious about that role, how was it like early on, and when exactly was it? Was it in the middle or I guess 69?
Altogether,
when he started
70,
doing that in 72 is when everything kicked up. But was he doing any of the promotions or booking with NWA?
I guess he had this role, and he was already a board director, board member of JWA at the time. But Baba had all the seniors, Yoshino Sato, the Kokichi Endo, the Michiya Yoshimura, that they were still like promoting and running the company, and Baba was still in his early 30s, and he was viewed as active superstar, although he was already in the office. But the reason he wanted to create and start All Japan was that he did not want to fire his older, the senpais. How's that? Yeah,
His seniors.
And seniors, yeah. And Channel 4 wanted to back Giant Baba as new establishment and leave. Yeah, why don't you leave JWA and create your own company and start the company, and then in the Channel 4, NTV, Nippon Television will always back you. And he happily left the company.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, JWA went down quickly. And that was a switch of the power. But he didn't do that within JWA. He left the company and really completely started the new company. Although when JWA company went down, all the like 8 to 10 wrestlers, they were still with JWA. Baba had to take them, basically.
Like inherit them.
Yeah,
absorb them.
But Giant Baba wasn't completely happy because he really defeated the whole purpose of leaving,
Right.
Yeah. And Baba didn't really use these ex-JWA wrestler on top. The Kintaro Oki, the Umanosuke Ueda, the Great Kojika, all these people he didn't want to use on top. And eventually, Kintaro Oki left and went back to South Korea and started his own company. And Umanosuke Ueda went back to States, and that's where he lived. And Great Kojika went back to Amarillo, Texas for a while, and then became Kang Hu Lee and had his run. And eventually all these people came back and joined again. But yeah, Giant Baba wanted to run his company with his people. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then that end of 72 was the year that Munich Olympic wrestling representative, that Tomomi Tsuruta, Jumbo Tsuruta, as a golden rookie, he started. Jumbo and his generation was the type of wrestlers the Baba wanted to promote, not the old leftover guys from JWA. Does that make sense?
New guys, proven athletes like Baba himself. Baba was a proven athlete. Tommy Tsuruta, Jumbo Tsuruta was a proven athlete and got his training in the States from the best in the NWA.
Right out of college, right out of Munich 72 Olympic. Superstar rookie from the day one. And Giant Baba and Jumbo Tsuruta, the matches, right? Yeah.
He's the prince.
He's a prince. And also Jumbo, or I should say, young Tommy Tsuruta was sent to Amarillo, Texas before his debut in Japan. He wasn't even trained that much in All Japan Dojo. He was sent right to Dory Funk, Funk family place in Amarillo, and that's where he started. Yeah.
You can see in his wrestling, he doesn't wrestle like a typical Japanese type wrestler. You could say he's totally different.
He works like a Dory Funk.
He works like a big NWA monster type. He was always a perfect match for Brody.
Baba, naturally wanted to have somebody tall, big, heavyweight wrestler in his company.
And can move. And can throw a drop kick.
Super athlete. And it's a little sidetrack, but when we talked about it before, but when Jumbo as a rookie was sent to Amarillo, Texas, another rookie he became friend with in Amarillo territory at the time, and late 72 into early 73 was very young Stan Hansen. Interesting history, huh?
And wasn't Tenryu also around at that time?
Not another 3 years. Okay. Tenryu wouldn't start until 76.
But he's another example of what Baba would want, right?
Yeah, like a former star sumo wrestler. Yeah. And he didn't even cut the sumo hair off, when he went to Amarillo, Texas. He still had the sumo hairdo, like a samurai. Isn't that interesting? He went to the States and debuted. And Tenryu's 76 debut opponent in America, in Amarillo, was rookie Ted DiBiase. Isn't that interesting? Right out of college.
Came up together. It's funny.
But that really helped Baba's another myth, legacy, legend of your rightful heritage of professional wrestling. Yeah. And strong connection with America. Wrestling business came from America, right? And reading oriented Japanese wrestling fan really read all these stories, well, including myself. But you know what I'm saying? Jumbo's connection in his rookie year he had spent in Amarillo, Texas, and Dory Funk, Terry Funk, and late Dory Funk Sr., they all became so close figure to Japanese wrestling fans. They're like a sister territory to All Japan fans. Does that make sense?
Like the famous, the stars of the time, the famous outsider stars that were regulars as well.
And also, up until then, Japanese babyface against American heels, the Japanese wrestling format. But the Baba was able to create babyface Americans. Yeah. Does that make sense?
The Funks are the best example.
Before Funks, Dick Beyer, the Destroyer, intelligent, sensational Destroyer, was the biggest rival of Ricky Dawson and the bad guy at the time. And he made figure four leg locks famous in Japan, right? Then when Baba's company started, Dick Beyer, the Destroyer, came in and worked the tour. And there was a program that if he lost this match single match against Giant Baba, that he will join the company. Then Dick Beyer, of course, lost the match to Giant Baba. And following spring, Dick Beyer brought his entire family, the two sons, one daughter, and his wife, the whole family moved to Japan, and they lived in Japan for the next 7-8 years. Oh my gosh. There was the biggest story that not just match or two, but Destroyer, Dick Beyer moved his whole family and became like an All Japan member, and his family lived in Japan and spoke the language and went to school here.
Japanese resident.
That was the biggest. I mean, something Inoki couldn't do. You know what I'm saying?
He got beyond wrestling. He became very popular in pop culture.
Oh, Destroyer. Oh, yeah, really famous. Late night game shows, the variety shows. You lived in Japan. It's just like
records.
Variety game show heaven, huh? And,
yeah, and he was always on there singing in Japanese and doing silly things and.
Yeah, and then he spoke the language too. He picked up the language, not as good as his kids, but yeah, and it became a cultural icon in Japan. So he was being veteran. That was like basically last big run as a professional wrestler, but he chose Japan to stay here, and he was part of early All Japan's big roster. Yeah, Baba and Destroyer became tag team. Yeah, it's a really, really big thing. So these are the type of thing promoter, Giant Baba was producing. And also at the same time, that very beginning of All Japan Pro Wrestling, that family of Rikidozan was in the press conference, and that the Rikidozan's, that the widow brought this Rikidozan's old international heavyweight title belt, the physical belt, and gave it to Baba. Use that. Then following year, it became PWF heavyweight title.
Mm-hmm.
All these rightful historical, the physical championship belt too, but all the lineage image was there with Giant Baba.
I think it feels like that's a big part of his image as a whole, is that he protected all the traditions and the past, everything that came before. He tried to hold it together and keep the lineage and keep.
Yeah, Rikidozan's widow, the Keiko-san came. That was a big thing, and presented this old antique belt. That the belt was created, that designed after Luther's belt. If you know the metal, gold metal belts.
Mm-hmm, very tiny one.
Yeah, kind of tiny one for today's standard, yes. But that the image of what World Heavyweight Champion should be. Then we call it Luther's belt. But Rikidozan loved it so much, but he made his championship belt look just like Luther's belt, right? And that was at Rikidozan's home. And Rikidozan's widow Keiko-san brought that physical belt to Baba and presented. So therefore, forget JWA, right? I mean, Baba's All Japan became part of Rikidozan family too at the same time. There's all these right things about historical and almost conservative, but as a kid, I really believed every single bit of all these little historical items. Yeah.
Oh, and also you also mentioned that connections to Rikidozan, but also his sons would go on to All Japan.
Right. The older son, that Yoshihiro Momota became ring announcer first, then became wrestler. And Momota Mitsuo, that the younger son of Rikidozan, he still worked to this day. But he joined. Yeah, right. Then Chikara, his son, that means grandson of Rikidozan, work as a wrestler now. And then they're still here. But the two sons of Rikidozan joined Baba's All Japan real early. So that helped Baba's image too, right? That is the All Japan is the right company.
Mm-hmm. The blood is connected to from JWA to All Japan, and New Japan is something different.
And Rikidozan to Baba, right?
Right. Like it's like a Shakespeare or something. Like the
all these image, the Baba always kept that. They made sure that that all the right connection from America it's all Baba's. And the Rikidozan heritage and all the lineage and historical championship belt to all these things, physical belt too. It's all Baba's. And then Channel 4, the Rikidozan's network, right? That Friday night, 8 o'clock, that was Baba. But when JWA went down, that and Giant Baba started his All Japan Pro Wrestling, it was Saturday night, 8 o'clock. Because Nippon TV Channel 4, dropped the Friday night program before JWA went down. And what happened later on in 73 was that TV Asahi Channel 10 took that image and started running their show on Friday night 8 o'clock for Inoki. So they took the image of like a Japanese wrestling fans is conditioned to watch every Friday night, 8 o'clock wrestling. The channel has, switched from the Nippon TV to TV Asahi, but TV Asahi NET at the time was so smart that when Inoki and Sakaguchi joined and made New Japan bigger company, that they took the 8 o'clock Friday night time slot altogether too. Therefore, they took that, Friday night, 8 o'clock image. Succeeded. That's another, interesting part of that television history in wrestling in Japan.
Very interesting, because a lot of the time when the company had a deal with the television company, they were successful.
Meaning like a network budget. Yeah. Network budget. Yeah. Because they were, it's estimated though, but in 1973 money, they were paying like a $200,000 a week, to each, to Baba's company, and that's like 800,000 a month. It's like almost like a 10 million a year.
Yeah, it was fresh content every week.
Yeah, I mean,
for
$10 million annual budget. That the Channel 4 is preparing for. Yeah, that's how you run big company, and that's why you had this. Every tour, you have this top expensive talents from all over territory from America. Yeah.
And on top of that, Baba and his wife, Motoko Baba, they already had quite a bit of money. It's they're already in a financial position. Yeah, I mean, they're
and had a condominium in Hawaii, of course.
So they had everything.
Between tours, King and Queen.
King and Queen, exactly.
Yeah,
they had everything.
And between tours, they get on the plane and go to their condominiums in Hawaii and take weeks off. Oh wow! In Hawaii, and he appointed Lord James Blair's as the head of PWF, Pacific Wrestling Federation. Right. Well, PWF never really ran wrestling shows, but they needed establishment that the. John Bob probably didn't want to call this his new heavyweight championship All Japan Heavyweight Champion, right? Mm-hmm. He needed like some recognizable organization's name. Therefore, Pacific Wrestling Federation, PWF, and that the president was Lord James Blair's from Hawaii. So I, including other kids, back then as wrestling fans, we believed it, right? There's a new organization called PWF, Pacific Wrestling Federation. It's in Hawaii, and they recognize Giant Baba as champion, right? And he used the physical Rikidozen belt for that title. All these little things and all these, reading-oriented Japanese fans really learn these little details and believe it.
Lord Blair is stuck with that role for decades after
that. Next 30 years of it, right?
He would always, before the big, what would turn
title
into
match,
Triple Crown later. He would always be in the front row. Any All Japan anybody out there wants to watch, if you look from the 90s or the 80s.
James plays from Hawaii, yeah.
He's usually...
And also he was an opponent on old Rikidozens, yeah, dating back. So those little details are very important in wrestling.
The connections.
Yeah. Well, the heritage and yeah. So Baba really cherished these things, yeah. And also, he never really had falling out with any promoters or wrestlers for that matter.
Yeah, he has a famous reputation. He's loved worldwide. He's loved within the industry and as a promoter.
Yeah, what was so interesting is though, well, the company wasn't all that big, actually. It was ran by Baba and Mrs. Baba and just 10 other guys, whereas Inoki's All Japan company always had like over 100 employees in the company, but the Baba's company always kept it small, but had strong connections. Yeah. And yeah, that was how they ran wrestling. That also meant really closed door society, though.
Mm-hmm.
It was really hard to go in, and if once you're in, you're in. You're not in, you're not in, kind of thing.
Tight knit in the backstage area.
Yeah, but you have to be Mrs. Baba's favorite. That's why people kissed up a lot.
Maybe in our next episode, we'll probably have to talk more about Mrs. Baba because we'll talk more about the 70s next time, but Baba as a wrestler started to wind down and not take, he wasn't a main event character from, the 80s on. He was
right.
He was taking more of a backseat. He was involved, of course, but it was more of on a tag team
promoter
basis.
And producer, yeah.
Promoter and producer, yeah.
Big one sole booker. He decides who goes over, who's not.
Really the king.
Really the king. And what was interesting is though that such an old-fashioned promoter, right? So kind of like your, some Machinik and Vern Gagne, that the old-fashioned promoters, they did not have written contracts. Picked up a phone call, and Dory Funk Jr. and Baba will talk over the phone and book American wrestlers. They come in, but they didn't really sign contracts, just handshake. But they still give you visa. You know what I'm saying?
So your character was a really important part of all of this when you were going over there. There was a lot of trust involved because there was really no other way.
When we talk about Giant Baba, we have to talk about wrestler Giant Baba, but we also have to talk about promoter Giant Baba.
Mm-hmm. And it's very different.
Mainly talking about promoter Giant Baba today. Yeah.
And it's different from Inoki, who was also a wrestler and promoter, but he did it a different way. Baba became...
That's why Antonio Inoki needed big lieutenant Seiji Sakaguchi.
And Baba was he had Mrs. a specific idea. He had Mrs. Baba to do the dirty work, but
But what was interesting though, their marriage was not acknowledged until 1982 or so.
Any reason?
Oh, I guess Mrs. Baba's, the rich, family in Kobe did not acknowledge it. Baseball player Shohei Baba, fine, but not professional wrestling Giant Baba. Yeah, that's a little bit of stigma in professional wrestling in Japan, I guess.
And maybe more back then, too.
Yeah, but we'll talk about that next time.
Yeah, we'll talk about that, Mrs. Baba, and more of the younger generation that comes from the late 70s and 80s.
All right, so we can go into mid to late 70s next time.
Mid to late 70s. Slowly. That sounds good.
But at the same time, we're doing we study Japanese wrestling history, though.
Yeah, and the other side, not New Japan, but All Japan, it's a little bit harder to access, watching things in order or having access to it in general.
Like in the early 80s into mid 80s, like a younger, reporter like myself, was like the All Japan backstage was such an uncomfortable place to be.
We need to hear more stories about that.
Yeah, because too. Mrs. Baba, plays favorite. You know what I mean?
Ah, okay.
Yeah, I wasn't. You know what I'm saying?
That'll be for next time.
All right, sounds good.
Okay, so where can we find you on social media?
On Twitter, Fumihiko Dayo, Fumihiko Dayo, Fumihiko Dayo on Twitter, or just Fumi Saito on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram as Fumi Saito 2001, but I'm not there that much.
And I'm at Justin M. Knipper, Knipper on Twitter. That's it for now. That was part 2. Join us next week for part 3. Until next time, Fumi.
So long from Tokyo.